There's a very old story about a guy named Job. We're told in the story that Job is a good man. He's a very good man. It says that he is blameless. He's the best man in his entire region. Job is also a very wealthy man. He has houses, he has land, he has all kinds of livestock. He has servants to tend everything. He even has 10 children, 7 boys and 3 girls. But then one day, everything comes crashing down. In the same day, he finds out that all of his livestock has either been stolen or killed in a natural disaster. All of the servants that have been tending the livestock have been killed as well. Then he receives the news that all of his children were at one of his son's house. And a great wind came up and the house collapsed and killed all of his kids. To make matters worse, he then develops these sores that are incredibly painful, and he has them from head to toe. This is the point at which, in his misery, he takes off his clothes, he tears them off, and he sits down next to a campfire. He sits there in the dust and covers himself in ashes. It's about this time that his wife shows up and says, "What's wrong with you, Job? Why are you holding on to your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die? Be done with it already." He doesn't, for the record. Word starts to spread throughout the community. And that's when his 3 friends show up. When they come up, they don't actually recognize him at first because he's in such bad shape. When they do recognize him, they tear their clothes, start weeping, and they sit in the ashes and the dust with him. For 7 days and 7 nights, they sit there in silence. Nobody says a word because they see that his suffering was immense. When they break the silence, it's Job that speaks first. And when Job speaks, the first thing that he says is to curse the day that he was born. He says, "Let that day disappear. Let the night that I was conceived turn to darkness. Let gloom and blackness consume everything." He goes on this long dirge about how he wishes that he was never even born. After he's done talking about that, well, then his friends start in. And they all give their answers as to why they think this is happening. Never mind the fact that Job never asked for their opinion. They all still give their ideas of what's going on. And essentially, all 3 of his friends say the same thing. They all basically say that somehow Job deserved everything that's happening to him. See, they were under a belief at that point in time that God punishes or rewards in this lifetime based on what kind of actions you had, whether you were faithful or not to God. It's actually a very early Old Testament idea, but it's kind of like a karma idea. People get what they deserve. Which means that by implication, if you have a lot, if things are going well, well then you must be doing something right. You must be more faithful. And by implication, if something bad happens to you, well that means you must have done something sinful to deserve it. And in Job's case, his friends look at this immense suffering and they think, I don't know what it is, but Job, you must have done something really bad. You deserve everything that you've gotten. His friends go back and forth, arguing about why this happened or why that happened. They go on for a very long time. But eventually they come to everything, the end of everything that they're going to say. Everybody has had their chance to speak. And once they've had their chance to speak, that's when God speaks. That's when out of a whirlwind, God answers Job. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. Job, where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know who stretched a measuring line across it. On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Tell me, who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no further, this is where your proud waves halt. Tell me, Job, have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by its edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and the upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all of this. Tell me, what is the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? I mean, surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no man lives, a desert with no one in it, to satisfy a desolate wasteland, and to make it sprout with grass? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone and the surface of the deep is frozen? Tell me, Job, can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of heaven? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, saying, here we are? Job, who endowed the heart with wisdom, or gave understanding to the mind? Who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens, when the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together? Do you hunt prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in the thicket? Who provides the food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wonder about for a lack of food? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months until they bear? Do you know the time that they give birth? They crouch down and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and grow strong in the wilds. They leave and do not return. Who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied his ropes? I gave him the wasteland as his home, the salt flats as his habitat. He laughs at the commotion in town. He does not even hear a driver's shout. He ranges the hills for his pasture and searches for any green thing. Tell me, Job, will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will he stay by your manger at night? Can you hold him to the furrow with a harness? Will he till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on him for his great strength? Will you leave your heavy work to him? Can you trust him to bring in your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, but they cannot compare to the pinions and feathers of the stork. The ostrich lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly, as if they were not even hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain, for God did not endow her with wisdom, or give her a share of good sense. And yet, When she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. And Job, tell me, do you give the horse its strength, or clothe his neck with a flowing mane? Do you make him leap like a locust, striking terror with his proud snorting? He paws fiercely, rejoicing in his strength, and charges into the fray. He laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. He does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against his side, along with the flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement, he eats up the ground. He cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. At the blast of the trumpet, he snorts, "Aha!" and catches the scent of battle from afar, the shout of commanders and the battle cry. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Does it spread its wings toward the south? And does the eagle soar at your command and build his nest on high? He dwells on a cliff and stays there at night. A rocky crag is his stronghold. From there he seeks out his food. His eyes detect it from afar. His young ones feast on blood, and where the slain are, there is he. And so I say to you, Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty attempt to correct him? Let him who accuses God answer to him. And then Job said to God, I am unworthy. I have nothing to say. I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer twice. And I will say no more. Job and his friends think they have everything figured out. They think they know why this is happening or that is happening. They think they know what God is doing. They claim to speak with wisdom and knowledge about the grand plans of the Almighty. And about that time, God speaks to them and shows them exactly how little they know. God shows them that even though their experience is intense and immediate, that in reality they are only one small part of God's grand scheme, of God's story. God shows them that their insight is like blindness compared to what God sees. God shows them that their knowledge and their wisdom is like that of a newborn child compared to the wisdom and the knowledge of God. And in response to what God shows them, Job has the only response that you can possibly have, which is to say nothing. There is no right answer to the questions that God is asking Job. He spoke once, but he will speak no more. God shows Job that while it looks like his entire world has come crashing down, that in reality Job is simply part of a much, much larger story that God is working out over the course of time. It's a story in which God still has control, in which God is still working. The last word of Job's story has not yet been written. And what is true of Job is also true for us. The last word of our story has not been written either. The story of Job teaches us that everything that we experience in our lives is in fact part of something way bigger than each of us. We are part of something that is so big we can't even really comprehend it. We are part of God's eternal and ongoing story, a story that has not yet been finished, a story in which God is still working and moving. I'm sure that some of us here this morning are in the middle of something incredibly difficult. Something that we can't understand, that we feel like we don't deserve, something that we want to cry out to God and say, why is this happening to me? Some of us may not be in the middle of that kind of storm, but we've certainly been through it in the past. For some of us, that storm may be coming in the future. We just don't know it yet. Whenever we face the storms of life, whenever we find ourselves trying to come up with answers about why something has happened to us, let us remember the story of Job. Let us remember that we are only one small part of something much bigger than any of us. And let us be freed from the need to always know why things are happening to us. Let us trust that our story is not over. Let us trust that the last word belongs to God. Let us trust that God is still at work. Amen.